There's a line in Shakespeare, I don't remember which play, it says, "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." There's a very important lesson here. An essential part of spiritual awakening, or we could call it the awakening of consciousness, is to learn to become aware of the difference between the situation that you find yourself in and what your mind says about the situation that you find yourself in, particularly challenging situations. Many of you at this time are perhaps confined to a small space, perhaps a small apartment, not allowed to go out except to buy groceries or other essentials. Perhaps you have to share that space with several people, or there's nobody else and you're feeling lonely, or you may be experiencing that money is becoming scarce because you've been laid off, no more income, or you're feeling sick and there's a fever, there's cough. Now, all these things that many of you are experiencing now would conventionally, normally be called bad. And yes, I suppose on a conventional level they are not pleasant, particularly if you're sick. So what does it mean? What does Shakespeare mean when he says nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so? So your very essential spiritual lesson is to be able to differentiate between a situation that you are experiencing and your mental commentary about the situation that you're experiencing, the thoughts that you have concerning the situation that you're experiencing. Now, for most people, anybody who's not sufficiently aware, for most people, whatever they experience and the mental commentary that they have about their experience are a single phenomenon. They cannot separate them. So, let's say you are cooped up in a small space, have been there for already a week or 2 weeks, and you're thinking about how much longer and you can't stand it anymore. This is just too awful. And the self-talk continues, and it's telling you how awful and unacceptable this situation is, and this self-talk may generate self-pity, it may generate anger, it may generate depression, and it certainly will generate fear, because a lot of the self-talk is about how bad it's not just how bad it is now, but how bad it's going to be. It's going to be worse. That's what the mind is often saying. And then when the mind is saying that it's going to get worse, then basically for you it is already worse, and it gets worse and worse. So since many of you have spare time these days, I suggest experimenting a little bit and becoming aware of the difference between the situation you find yourself in and the mental commentary about the situation. So when you feel unhappy, basically suffering where you are, and you're saying, I can't take much more of this, whatever the mind is saying, or the mind is saying it's going to get worse. I can't take another 3 weeks of this, how could I? What am I going to live on? And so on. So the commentary concerns certain things that are happening now. It may concern certain things in the so-called future. So you become aware of the self-talk. Basically, most humans talk to themselves a lot. Or you may also be talking to others. If you share space with other people, then this self-talk becomes the dialogue that you have with others. And as an experiment, I would suggest that you ask yourself, how would I experience this situation if I did not add any unnecessary thought to it? How would I experience this moment, the situation that I'm finding myself in, without the addition of an interpretation of the mind? I sometimes call that, in most cases, this addition, this interpretation, in many cases it's negative. There's usually not that much that the mind can comment on a very pleasant experience, it just experiences it, but the mind loves it when there's a difficult situation, then the mind can really get going and has a long story about it. How would I experience this moment without the addition of unnecessary thought? That's a strange question. I sometimes say that this addition of thought is excess baggage in your life. And many humans don't realize that they're making themselves unhappy for years and years, and sometimes a whole lifetime, because they never learn to differentiate between situations they find themselves in and that which the mind adds to the situation. So they experience the situation through the narrative of the mind. They cannot say, here's a situation and here's a narrative, but this is what I'm asking you to experiment with now, because you have plenty of time, or many of you have. How would I experience this moment if I refrained from interpreting it, calling it either good or bad? Okay, now this question doesn't have an answer on a conceptual level. This question directs your attention into the present moment, the aliveness of the present moment. And if you don't add any thought to it, but just an experiment, you can, if the experiment fails, if you don't like it, then you can continue with continuously adding narratives to the situation, and continue to experience the situation through the veil of the narrative that comments how awful it all is, that your life is falling apart, the world is falling apart, it's all so dreadful. That's a narrative. So, how would I experience this moment if I did not add? Okay, let's do it. Let's refrain. It's not a doing. It's a refrain from doing something that is normally an unconscious mind process. Okay, what am I left with? Here I am. I'm sitting here, looking around, breathing, whatever is here in this room. Look out of the window, see a bit of sky, tree, the light coming through the window, furniture in the room, whatever else is happening here, sensory perceptions. And you're breathing, and you're alive, presumably, although you may not actually experience being alive, but you can experience it by feeling the inner energy field of the body, which is alive. It's all part of the experience of this moment. And there you are, sitting there, and you have dropped the narrative. And all you're left with is the bare isness, beingness or isness of this moment. That's interesting. And you may suddenly feel a kind of weight lifting of your shoulders, the weight that you habitually probably carry, which is the weight of, this is why I call it excess baggage. It is the weight of unconscious thinking, reactive thinking, the mind creating unhappy narratives. And then what you then experience is the body is reflecting back to you the unhappy narrative in the form of an unhappy emotion. That's called normal living. That's what, when you watch a movie, or everybody's doing it, that's just normal, not very few people question it. But there is another way, and that's the way of awareness or presence.